So if you guys follow me on Twitter, Instagram, you'll know that a few weeks ago I got a new camera, the Intrepid 4x5, second version of it. Now, once I had the Shen Hao, I was pretty much certain I was never going to buy another camera again, certainly not another 4x5. I may in the future upgrade to an 8x10, I thought, but I'll never buy another 4x5 camera. But as I progressed in my photography, and wanted to branch further and further out, especially with backpacking trips, the weight of the Shen Hao was really becoming an issue. It's just under 6 pounds, and the promised weight of the Intrepid here was actually 2 pounds, and that's completely accurate, by the way. This is a 2-pound large format camera. So not only does that significantly reduce the weight of the camera itself, but it has allowed me to get a smaller tripod head. So really, in total, this 2-pound camera is going to shave right around 5 or 6 pounds, maybe even a little bit more off of my total pack weight. And so that's really going to allow me to hike further and further out into kind of these backcountry areas without having to break my back or severely limit my pace. Now, I want to give you guys a little bit of, we can call it a review or maybe some initial impressions of this camera, because I haven't actually put any film through the camera, but I feel with a large format camera, you don't really need to shoot it. I mean, it's just a box. What am I going to do? Talk about the dynamic range of the camera? Terrible. Not so bad. Or I could talk about the low light performance. Also terrible. Maybe a little less terrible. But I feel really the camera itself can be reviewed without having taken a picture of it. Now, first, a little bit about Intrepid. If you don't know about the company, they're based out of the UK, and it's two guys, Maxim and Eddie. And the company originally started, according to their website, they wanted to just make a design of a camera, make it kind of open source, so that you could mill out your own or maybe even 3D print your own. But then they decided to take it to Kickstarter and try to start making these, kind of make a production run of them. And that's how I initially heard about them. Probably some Petapixel article that somebody shared among my circle of film photographers. But I remember reading about it and was really excited at the time because you know, pretty much other than Arca Swiss, all your large format cameras are going to have to be secondhand. So it was exciting to see these guys making new cameras. Furthermore, their mission statement was to make a low-cost camera that people could really ease their way into large format. So not only are they making new cameras, but their goal is to get these cameras in as many people's hands as possible. Now, with their first generation camera, at that time I wasn't really looking to buy a new camera. I wasn't backpacking with my 4x5 gear yet. Their first generation camera looks-wise, wasn't exactly for me. It was all this birch plywood. And when I say all, I mean even the knobs, the rails holding the front standard, it was all plywood. The bed of the camera here was just a solid square, like a solid block of plywood. So aesthetically, maybe not my favorite, but still, I was very excited that people were making new cameras. Fast forward a couple years, and I've really started to try to take my photography off the beaten path further. I've been on several backpacking trips now with the Shen Hao, and it's becoming apparent to me that I'm going to have to lighten my load if I really want to get out there. And so I started feeling around on social media asking what people were using for lightweight cameras. And a few people recommended Chamonix, and then one of my friends, a large format photographer named Justin Lowry, really spoke highly of his Intrepid. At the time he was shooting the version 1 of it, but did everything he needed to do and was extremely lightweight. So I started to research their company more, hadn't looked at it in a couple years, and it turns out they had just announced the version 2 of the camera. And they had spoken to the customers. I think there were a few issues as far as maybe setting up the version 1 camera. There were a lot of steps to go through. And so their second generation aimed to fix all that. So I placed a pre-order for it back in November, right around my Zion trip. Now, I will say this, I still wasn't quite sold on the birch plywood look. The Shen Hao is a beautifully finished camera. It's basically a work of art. And, you know, not that I shoot for people to come up to me and talk in the field, but it always drew a crowd. Always drew lots of comments on how beautiful the camera was. However, in Zion this year, I started to notice something. I'll show you guys what I'm talking about. So I think you all know I shoot with, let me get the glare off of this. That's as good as it's going to get. I've got a Maxwell screen on here. It's the most expensive piece of gear I have as far as large format goes. And so I bought a screen protector. It's just a piece of plastic here, U-shaped. You slide it over the ground glass and keeps it from getting broken in your pack. What I started to notice over time, I shoot in Zion, Smokies, I get a lot of dirt and sand on here. As you're sliding it across, this is basically acting like a piece of sandpaper. So, I don't know if you guys can see this, but my beautifully finished camera is starting to sand the finish off. And so I started to think about it, and pragmatically, this camera was actually going to be better because if it was finished, I was going to sand the finish off anyway. So this non-finished plywood look, I became sold on it. Now, I'll say this as part of a review of the camera. When it came in the mail, it's a beautiful camera. For starters here, they've got the metal rails, metal tightening screws here. Looks so good. You can order it with different colors as far as your bellows go. I just went with black. But some of the bright colors definitely makes a statement. Furthermore, the bed of the camera here is not this solid square block of plywood anymore. They've got cutouts here near the front standard, then these milled areas back here to save weight. It's a traditional camera, but it also has a very modern feel to it. You can tell it's been milled out. Computer designed. It's really, really sleek looking. So not that this matters at all, but it's a slick looking camera. So what do you get when you order the camera? And then I'll go over setting it up, taking it down. You get the camera itself. Comes with, I don't know if you can see it on here, but grid ground glass. That is tough to say. And then you also get just a piece of wood here to put over your ground glass to protect it when you fold it up. Now, I guess the one thing I can review about this camera is the ground glass itself. I haven't traded it out with a Maxwell screen, but I'm going to. I would say the ground glass, it does pretty decent, especially for normal lenses. People just getting into it aren't going to have a problem with it. I compared it, same lens, to the Maxwell screen on my other camera, and look, the Maxwell screen is worth 2 to 3 times what this whole system is worth, so it's not a fair fight. I am going to switch the ground glass, but if you're starting out, it's going to be fine. You're going to be able to focus just fine with it, and like I said, it's on par, if not probably a little better than the original ground glass that came on my old Shen Hao. Definitely not a deal breaker. The ground glass is solid. Okay, so folded up, this is what the camera looks like. And for comparison, that is what the Shen Hao looks like. So already it's a much smaller camera. So we've got the Intrepid camera folded up here, which brings me to really my only gripe of the camera. When you're folded up here, the rear standard is just resting on the bellows. I'm a little bit concerned that over time that's going to stress the bellows. We'll just have to see how that holds up. What I'm probably going to do is maybe make a little block here so that in my pack it's not getting squeezed and pressing on the bellows anymore. You can tighten these knobs in the back here to kind of limit the amount of stress that places on it, but as you're closing it, again, that's literally my only, not necessarily a gripe, maybe, but just a little hesitation about the camera. By contrast, the Shen Hao, you can see the rear standard here, when you fold it up, it has a solid stop against the bed of the camera, so you're never going to stress out the bellows. I may never end up stressing them out with the Intrepid, but again, that's just a consideration I had when I first got the camera. So let's go ahead and open it up here. You unlock the rear standard, and this is one thing I was concerned about. The Shen Hao is so easy to set up. All you do is pop it open, and then the front standard is attached. It literally takes me 2 minutes, if that, to set it up. I'd heard that the original version of the Intrepid was difficult to set up, so I was a little bit hesitant about the second generation. Not a problem at all. I can set it up just as quickly as my Shen Hao. So you loosen the rear standard, it folds back up to vertical, and lock it in place. Now the front standard is just kind of free floating here. There's a screw that goes into the bed of the camera. When you fold it up, I usually just screw that into the bed. Now, let me make sure you can see this. There are 3 positions along the bed of the camera that you can place the front standard depending on if you're shooting a wide angle lens, a normal lens, or a longer lens. So the front standard here, there's a little slot, a little notch that centers it. In addition, if you're doing any swing on the lens, the bed here has little indicators that let you know the angle that you've got the front standard at. So you lock it into place, and the same thing with the rise and fall and tilt adjustments here. There's a little 0 notch. You screw it into place there, and pretty much you're zeroed out. It's a very, very stable camera once you have everything locked in place. I have absolutely no worries about anything falling, shifting, things like that. As far as movements go, this center screw at the base controls your shift and your swing. Plenty of movements, especially if you're out in the field. I usually, you see all these advertisements with dramatic shift and tilt and all that. When you're shooting landscapes, if you're not doing macro work, those movements are pretty much going to be very, very minimal. But you do have the ability with the front standard here to do plenty of movements. You can see how much rise and fall you have here. The rear standard is limited to 1 partial movement. There's no shift, no rise and fall with it. The only thing you can do is tilt it forward just a little bit. You can't tilt it back. You could just have a little forward tilt in it. If you watch Ben Horn's channel, whenever you move the rear standard here, it's compositionally allows you to enlarge or shrink the foreground with relation to the background. So really the only thing you're going to be able to do here is when you tilt it forward like that, you're bringing the top of the film closer to your lens. What that's going to do is actually, hold on, let me get this straight in my mind. Okay, a little rusty on my rear camera movements. When you tilt the rear standard forward like that, what you're doing is moving the top of the film closer to the lens. What that does is it actually decreases the foreground with relation to the background, the size of the foreground with relation to the background. So that's going to allow you to maybe correct some of that distortion you get with wide angle lenses. Those lenses tend to really separate the foreground and background. You tilt your camera forward, you can correct that. Again, Ben does that a lot. I've done it with a few images. Really can give you some dramatic looks in the right circumstances. All right, folding the camera back up, really simple, just the opposite of putting it together. Unloosen the tightening screw to the bed of the camera. Same thing with the tilt shift rise and fall screw. I put the base screw just screwed in to the rearmost mount in the bed of the camera. Compress the bellows again, the part that I'm a little bit concerned about, but people say, or Justin tells me, with his camera, he's never had an issue with it. loosen the rear standard, fold it all forward. When you get it compressed the way you want it, tighten the rear standard. Put your ground glass protector on there and you're good to go. Okay, so wrapping it up here, just my final impressions of the camera. I cannot recommend this camera enough. My only issue with it, again, is as it folds up, all that pressure is on the bellows there. I'm gonna make a little piece there just for my own peace of mind so that it has something hard to rest up against. Probably a non-issue, but again, the way I stuff it down in my backpack, I just don't want any extra pressure on the bellows. I'm really excited. This company seems to be really doing well if you follow them on social media. I'm really happy to see that people investing in large format. I'm happy to see them doing well. The camera, like I said, it's basically the perfect field camera. The lightweight is just, when you pick it up, it doesn't feel like a toy. It feels substantial, but it's so light. I cannot emphasize enough how shockingly light it is while still feeling solid. The price, like I said, US, I think I paid $280 something, and that's shipped from the UK. You're not going to find a better deal. Even used, you're not going to find a better price, and certainly not a better built camera. So I cannot recommend this camera enough. Check out their website. I'll link it down in the show notes below. Thanks for watching. You guys know what to do. Thumbs up, like, subscribe, all that, and we'll see you next time.